realistic birds with watercolors can be quite challenging, especially if you are a beginner. I have personally experienced the difficulties that come with it. Are you struggling with hard edges, feathers that lack softness, overworking certain areas, trying to paint every single feather, every single hair, and adding layer after layer, hoping it will start to look more natural? And no matter what you do, are your birds still not looking realistic? So the good news is that I can teach you how to achieve realistic soft and smooth feathers while avoiding overworking certain areas. The key to painting birds is to use the wet on wet technique. This technique is very forgiving, allowing you to create a soft, smooth layer without having to work on every single feather or hair. I will teach you how to control water and paint from the very beginning, which will enable you to paint more realistically. My name is Raczynska and I live in the south part of Orange County in California. I'm a watercolor artist and teacher who has been teaching watercolors since 2016. In my 8-year career, I have taught thousands of people how to paint with watercolors. I have over 500,000 of followers on all social media platforms, and I run 2 online schools. I have even developed my own line of watercolor brushes, so I have a lot of experience as a watercolor teacher, especially with the 2 techniques, which is wet on wet and lifting. And I know how to paint realistic objects in watercolor. And now I am excited to share everything I know with you in this course. I will guide you through the process of creating 5 birds using wet on wet and lifting techniques. Each project is designed to build upon the previous one, allowing you to practice and practice and practice. I know that with my guidance, you will gain confidence and be able to paint realistic birds on your own. In project 1, we will focus on painting only with one color, using the wet on wet technique, and this will be our monochrome project. The goal is to create a contrast between light and shadows by lifting colors to add highlights and create a soft feather effect. So I am actually going basically everywhere right now. These are just the lightest values, and again, I am keeping my paper wet longer this way. So I'm just looking for some areas. Of course, the lightest areas need to stay as light as possible, but doesn't mean that I can't add any color there. So something like this, and then here I'm pressing a little harder here to release more of that paint. Now you don't want the water, like the brush, to be soaking in water basically. No, you still want to control like how much water. It's just like I was dipping my brush in water jar just to get more, because it just felt like I would be removing water instead from the paper. And this is the edge basically, right? But I gotta start working on these mid-tones. So before I grab my palette, so somewhere here, actually here and here, I'm gonna start with these mid-tones. So now I don't want as much water as before. So I still have like this is like a milk, maybe like ratio between water and paint. And I'll feel it out. If this doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel as thick in a way, then I'm gonna go for like a maybe half and half like ratio, right? So ratio between water and paint. Now at first you see, oh, paint is spreading and everything. That's okay. You want the paint to spread. Of course, you can decide how much control you want to have, because now I can grab a little heavier ratio. If I feel like there's too much water, I can wipe it on a towel and then go back. And now the brush does feel damp, but I have more control. And if I don't want that much control, I'm gonna grab even more water with this. I'm going for these mid-tones, and at the same time, like some of these darker areas are getting covered too. But what I'm gonna show you in a second is this damp brush technique. When you wipe your brush completely, like on a towel, you kind of squish it, and then you kind of brush through that painting with that damp brush. But here, with the tip of my brush, I'm gonna add some of this value toward the beak. So I have this old course in my old school, and this is on in my old teachable school, right? So it's a monochrome class, and I remember that was like the most popular actually course. And so I'm very happy to do this again, because The reason is because it's just so much easier to understand the values and like keeping areas much lighter versus keeping it like sometimes we just go too dark, right? And here with the tip of my brush, I'm gonna apply these darker tones. The reason I'm also going here is because the paper is drying fast, and if I don't supply this with more water and paint, this would dry on me too faster than I want, and I'm still not there yet. Like I still want to add more color, right? Because this is not dark enough. Now use the tip of your brush basically and press a little harder for the paint to release that paint. And in a second we're gonna grab like this cream top basically too. So we're gonna work on our darkest values, but what's happening too is like the paint is drying the paper is drying, so it kind of like you really want to actually cover most of these areas, and when you move around you keep your paper wet longer, right? So you want to do that, and that's why I'm like, okay, I need to do this first before I go for these darkest tones, just because I need to keep this wet longer. And then I can grab maybe more of this, but this is gonna be like a damp brush, so like a half and half like ratio, but I'm gonna wipe my brush on a towel so it looks damp, right? So we are gonna go for this damp brush technique in a second. I just want to first add a little more color here and here, so before I show this damp brush technique. Now for the damp brush technique, because now that my brush feels damp, I'm actually removing water from the paper, so it's kind of like good and bad, right? So that's why you want to always think like, okay, what can I do? Indigo. So this is a damp brush, still a damp brush technique, but we're picking up paint. So if you can see it, like I have some paint here, and you gotta be careful because if it says squished brush, like you're covering a lot more too, right? So you can maybe turn the brush a little bit just so you have the most control. And look at the highlighted parts and where you need to add these darker feathers, because maybe we don't need to add it everywhere. The reason we're also using this damp brush technique, and you want to do it with a softer brush, by the way, this is my quill, it's a long quill size 4, because if you use a stiffer brush, you're going to just pick up the paint and you're going to lift colors instead of like brushing through, right? So now what I want to do really is lift colors, but I can't lift the colors yet. You can also find me on social media, and I have 2 other online schools. Thank you so much.